I call this November 19th, 2018 meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Past the hour of 7 p.m., a public hearing with the Board of Assessors for the purpose of discussing the valuation of each class of property, the minimum residential factor, and the allocation of the tax burden among the four classes of real property: residential, open space, commercial and industrial, and of personal property.
Okay, is this on?
It is.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay, very good. Well, as you know, tonight is our annual tax classification hearing. As far as the agenda is concerned, we're going to talk a little bit first about what is classification. This is a required hearing that the Board of Selectmen has to conduct on an annual basis. So we'll do the statutory required part of the hearing, but also we use it as an opportunity to really give the board and the public an update in terms of what's happening with the values in Northborough, and in particular, what are we seeing in terms of new growth and economic development. When I'm through with the front portion of the presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Dan Brogy, our principal assessor, the sharp-dressed guy with the red tie in the front here. And Dan's going to walk you through the tax classification options that are before the board tonight. And then last but not least, we essentially turn it over to you folks, and you're going to take an actual vote regarding classification, the residential and the small commercial exemption. So those things will be explained. So let's start first with what is tax classification. So this class, the whole concept of classification goes back to the inception of Prop 2.5 back in 1979, 1980. Prior to Prop 2.5, it was not uncommon for assessors to sort of manipulate the data a little bit in terms of the values, in terms of the single-family homes versus commercial industrial. And so oftentimes the single-family home values would lag the commercial industrial, essentially kind of shift a little bit of the tax burden onto those properties. With the advent of Prop 2.5, the Department of Revenue regulates pretty much everything. In fact, you take votes tonight on whether or not to shift tax burden. However, it's the Department of Revenue that actually sets the tax rate based upon the votes that you'll take here this evening. But essentially what tax classification allows you to do is make a policy decision to overtly shift some of the tax burden from the residential onto a commercial industrial property, primarily. You can shift, as it says up here, up to 150% to be borne by the commercial industrial properties. So this is essentially, it is an overt policy decision made by the Board of Selectmen. Now, there's a few key concepts to keep in mind when we talk about classification. First and foremost is it doesn't add any additional taxes. It's about who pays the taxes and where you are shifting and causing one group to pay a larger portion of that tax levy. Again, this is a policy decision to artificially shift it from one class to another. As I said, you know, in some towns prior to Prop 2.5, that might have been done sort of informally, but because the Department of Revenue looks at this stuff so closely to make sure that the town of Northborough and all the other communities are in compliance with Prop 2.5, you have to be explicit about this, which means you have to hold a public hearing and have this discussion at your open meeting. One thing I always like to point out is that since its inception, 1979, 1980, no Board of Selectmen has ever voted to artificially shift the tax burden. And essentially for the board, in the past, it's always been an issue of fairness and sustainability. Having a level playing field for businesses in Northborough has been one of the fundamental pieces of our economic development strategy. So we don't do something that a number of neighboring communities do, which is provide incentives and give them breaks on their taxes to get them through the door, and then as soon as those incentives expire, they have an artificially high share of the tax burden. So we've had parity here since 1979, 1980. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with our values. So for fiscal 2019, now this is the fiscal year that just began July 1 of 2018 and goes to June 30th of 2019. So for fiscal year 19, we just had our new growth certified at 36.7 million. So we budgeted about 30 million, or estimated and forecast about 30 million. You know, we never really know until we get to this point what our new growth is going to be. So we tend to be conservative in our estimates, because although somebody may get approval at the planning board, they may or may not pull building permits, they really need to actually get going and be able to be counted as part of that new growth. But in terms of the different classifications, everything is up. Rarely do they all go up exactly the same rate. Residential values increased 5.7%, commercial values increased 2.3%, and industrial 5.6%. Now, when we say that they've increased, you know, you keep in mind it's the value of the existing stock that we have, as well as new growth, new commercial, new residential properties actually being constructed. Now, in terms of the large picture, one thing that you want to keep in mind here, we have a positive trend. You know, we always talk about trend analysis and looking at, well, what does this all mean? So based on these values and the new growth, the total value of the town is up from 2.79 to 2.94 billion dollars. That's about just under $150 million in overall new value. So that's positive, because if the town's overall valuation was declining, it would mean that our overall property values were declining, which, again, people say, well, if my property value goes down, then my taxes go down. The reality is it's a combination of your value, the tax rate, and what you pay in taxes. If the values go down, the rate will likely increase because the town can't function on a lower amount of tax levy. So, but overall, the good news is if you own a home and it's in Northborough, it's appreciating in value. So the single largest asset that most people own is going up in value. So that's a positive thing. The downside is as your asset goes up, your tax burden associated with that asset will increase marginally as well. So unless you're ready to check out, sell it, and retire and move someplace else, you know, for most people, they're not realizing that. But overall, I think we can all agree that if the value of the community is going in a positive direction, that is a good thing. When you start seeing a net value of a community declining, you get the sense that the community and the local economy is also in decline. If you go back to the early 2000s, the split between the commercial industrial property versus the residential, it was about 80-20 residential to commercial industrial, which means about 80% of our tax base is residential and only 20 is commercial industrial. So we've had some very excellent success in economic development over the years, particularly in the last 10 years or so, and we've seen that shift of that tax burden moving. So if you look down here in 2019, it's about 75-25 roughly for residential to commercial industrial. Now that is a positive thing for us. Again, we have more diversity in our tax base, and we have commercial industrial properties paying a larger share of the overall tax levy. That is generally the goal of most economic development initiatives in local government, because commercial industrial properties pay significantly more in taxes, and they tend to consume less in services. So it is overall a net positive for the community. And you can see over the years, you know, it may bounce around a point or two, and basically that comes down to a combination of what are the values, the single-family home values going up, they're going down, they're staying the same relative to commercial industrial, but it also has to do with what's being built. Are we building a lot of residential, or are we building more commercial industrial? So those things are always in ebb and flow, but we, again, in terms of long-term trend, we have increased the share of the tax levy that's being paid by commercial industrial properties, which is the point of our economic development program. So let's break down and talk a little bit about what that $36.7 million in new growth looks like. So now this is new construction essentially, or new personal property, which we'll talk about in a moment. So residential is up a little over 11 million. Years ago, and we have a chart that I'll show you in a moment. Years ago, we were booming as a residential community. As people pushed out from Boston and the 495 Beltway was growing, we saw large subdivisions and housing tracts coming in. So we saw a significant amount of new growth in the form of residential development. These days, that represents about 11 new houses. That doesn't mean they're $1 million each. The new construction itself is valued at about a little over 4 million or so. But for us, a year of big housing starts is, 8, 9, 10, maybe a dozen homes. And they tend to be, property that people held and they're getting ready to retire, or they subdivide it and a couple of houses pop up here or there. And that's essentially what we've seen for the last several years, no different than last year. Commercial, 4.3. The bulk of that is the second phase of the Northborough crossing, where the restaurants are down on that lower tier. So that's the majority that we've seen in terms of the commercial growth in the past year. And then industrial, we've seen a few projects. We're starting to see some development out on Bartlett Street. We've got a couple of significant developments that are occurring out there. As a precursor to the actual construction, the owner, who is the Gutierrez company that owns large tracts, they're subdividing the land, and Dan Brogy, our assessor, is very good about picking up the marginal increase in value as you start subdividing that land and you start going through that process. The values push up a little bit. So that's what we're seeing. But combined, we're looking commercial industrial about 9 million in new growth. So total real estate new growth is a little over $20 million. Now, we always make the distinction between real estate new growth. I always love the fact that it has the word real in it. It's tangible. It's something that tends to be endearing. Personal property, on the other hand, we're looking at $16.6 million in personal property growth. And the cautionary tale that we tell you every year is, think of it this way. In your personal lives, most people have a home and they have a vehicle, right? If you buy a home and you buy a vehicle, 5 to 10 years later, what happens to your home in general? Come on, this is the audience participation part of the program. What happens to your home in general? We got a realtor. What happens? It appreciates. Thank you. Your home appreciates in value. That same vehicle, 5, 10 years later, what happens to that? It depreciates. This little category, personal property, right here, that's the stuff that depreciates. So when companies buy new racking systems in their warehouses, they buy new office equipment, things of that nature, not the building or the land, but the stuff that goes in it that allows them to do what they do, that stuff depreciates. And so for purposes, first of all, we should just step back. This whole concept, of new growth is only really relevant in the context of Proposition 2.5. The concept behind new growth is that under 2.5, you're limited in how much your tax levy can go up, okay? But there's also an acknowledgement that if things are growing, if you're building new houses and you're building new facilities, that's going to have a marginal impact on what the services you need to provide, right? So for the purposes of your ability to grow your tax levy to meet those demands, they created this whole new growth sort of calculation, and personal property was included in there. The difference is, we know, I don't want to say that that's not real growth, but it's going to depreciate like your vehicle and unlike your home. So we like to see the numbers. We talk about new growth, we like to see them up here. We're happy to see them here for purposes of our levy capacity. It's still important, and it does matter significantly. But in terms of the value of the town and the real growth of what we're seeing, it's the top numbers that we're really mostly focused on. So we have $16.6 million in personal property growth. Overall, that's new growth, but then you depreciate what's in the account. Overall, personal property is only up about $9 million for the town. So despite the fact that we picked up 16 million plus, we're really only up 9 million because it's net of depreciation. So I know there's a lot of concepts to introduce in this, but I think it's important for people to understand. We go through some exercises because we're living in the confines of this somewhat arbitrary formula called Proposition 2.5, and we take advantage and we report and track things accordingly. But you have to understand some of this stuff is sort of an exercise and not necessarily. I don't view that as the same as that. Those houses are going to be here 10 years from now, and they're going to be worth more money. 10 years from now, that's going to be worth next to nothing. So overall, our new growth number is $36.7 million, which again is positive. We have a couple things going. We have the overall valuation of the town is coming up, and we also are adding to that through new growth. So both those factors are positive for the town of Northborough. This is the chart I alluded to earlier in the presentation. This is a 15 or 16-year history of new growth. And I know it can be tough to see, but the first, this mustard color, that's residential. And so if you look back here, you see, look at all the residential development we had. Growing a lot residentially here. Not so much commercial and industrial growth. Biggest residential growth we saw recently, anybody want to tell me what this is, 2010, 2011?
Avalon.
Avalon Bay, thank you, Don. Avalon Bay, 283 units of residential housing up by the mall. Followed by this sort of less mustardy color of yellow. This is commercial. Come on, anybody want to fathom a guess what that is?
Shops at 9 and 20.
Shops at 9 and 20. That's the old name. You got to get with Northborough Crossing, Don.
Okay.
It moved on and rebranded. It's Northborough Crossing, the upper section of Northborough Crossing. So in these couple of years, we saw the largest residential followed by the largest commercial development. And so these 3 years clearly are not indicative of what we would anticipate we're going to see in the future. So now you start to tick down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is really kind of more of the new norm. And I give you two averages on the slide in the bottom left-hand corner. The 15-year average of new growth is 51 million. The 5-year average of new growth is about 36 million, almost exactly what we achieved for fiscal 19. This is the new norm. This is what we see coming and sustaining. We will see some additional economic development, of course. We will see another house here or there. Is there the possibility that we could see another Avalon Bay somewhere in town? Yes, that could happen. It's not in the pipeline, it's not in the planning process, and we're not anticipating at this point. So this is what we see. You know, we budget conservatively about $30 million. We estimate $30 million of new growth. Now, in terms of our budget, $30 million in new growth is about $525,000 roughly in new tax dollars for us. So, so it's meaningful and it's positive, but I don't think we're going to be anticipating seeing these numbers, or really, quite frankly, even these numbers moving forward. And that's important because you start to, one of the things that we do, we look at, you know, trend analysis, and we look at where we've been to forecast where we think we're going to be in the future. Northborough is not built out, but we're approaching build out. When you think about our two primary areas for economic development is the northeast corner and the southeast corner. Well, one is where the Wegmans and the Northborough Crossing and the Northborough New England Baseball Complex, all that is been constructed. That's largely built out. Along that corridor there, you have Kimball Sand and Gravel, which is a 50-acre parcel to be developed at some point in the future. But there's not a whole lot more down there. Then you look at the other corner, the Gutierrez property, and this is the one you've heard me talk about for the last 5+ years, is that's an area we could see significant development. Well, we're seeing that significant development. We have several distribution centers that are going up. There's 4 right now that are planned, 1 under construction. It's about 220,000 square feet. But in total, over the next 2 to 3 years, we're anticipating about 1 million square feet of new development off of Bartlett. Now, you think, well, are we looking at this? No. I mean, sadly, you know, we're going to see, maybe we might see something that looks like this, you know, as those parcels get developed. But again, once those are done, we're going to see a new, you know, a new normal right around down here. Town of Northborough, again, we don't have a lot of land for residential development. We've done very well for ourselves over the past decade with regard to economic development. But, you know, as we start to mature, we start to see us approaching build-out. Now, the moral of the story here, and the thing for you as a policy board to keep in mind, is as we approach build-out, then one of the things is you start building your level of services, and your budgets have to be predicated on the acceptance of the information that you're not going to see $90 million of new growth in the future, that you might see something more sustaining, and you just need to be planned accordingly. This isn't bad news. The town has done very well for itself. This is good news. It's good planning, it's good economic development, and we just need to be cognizant as we move forward that this is what we're looking at. If you ignore it and you plow ahead and you say, well, I'm going to plan and budget on a 15-year average because that's more data points, it's better data, it's not better data because it doesn't include the reality of what you know is happening in terms of available land. So this is a slide everybody wants me to get to, and I'm actually happy to get here because it's good news. This is the impact on the average single-family home for fiscal 19. So when we go to town meeting, we do our best to project what we think the tax impact will be based on the budgets that are passed. And also our forecasting, in this number here, we projected $333 for the average single-family home. In that number, we assume as part of our projection that single-family home values are going to increase by 3%. Years ago, we'd do this forecast, and we'd say, this is based on the budget that we're asking to be approved, and it is not taking into consideration market changes in values. We've got a little more sophisticated because we want to be more accurate in what we're telling folks, rather than just put a disclaimer. So we assumed a 3% based on what we had seen the previous years, a 3% increase. I just told you the actual increase is closer to 6%. And by the way, the data that we're talking about isn't what's happening in real time. So a realtor looking at what's happening, the values now, or somebody selling their house is going to say, no, it's either higher or lower than that. This data is from calendar year 2017, correct, Dan? So calendar year 2017, because that's the last year we had a complete set of data, we're in calendar year 18, so there's always a lag. So this market valuation, this $45, if all things being equal, that would be $333 plus, that's the other 3% to get us to that 6% market increase. We got a few things that are happening in our favor that are going to mitigate that. One is that the Algonquin Regional High School assessment came in lower than originally approved at town meeting because they got a little bit more money in state aid. So it came in about $19,000 less than was approved. Now, we also, the municipal side, got a little bit more in state aid. We got a little over $9,000 more in state aid. But the real factor here is the reduced overlay. When we budget at the beginning of the year, we budget about 1.2% of the tax levy that we set aside, assuming that there will be people filing for exemptions and abatements. And in 2017, the statewide average was 1.19% of what people budgeted or assumed for overlay account. So we're right on that. But as we get to this point in the year, and the fact that our principal assessor has done a great job of A, making sure the values are accurate to the market, and B, making sure there's a good process if particularly a large taxpayer is filing for an abatement, that we go through a good process there to make sure that the values are and the taxes are accurate. So the bottom line is we were able to reduce that by about $283,000. And so the combination of all of these factors has the final FY19 tax impact at $331. And so this budget and this tax impact is what was unanimously supported by all the financial boards and committees, and it's what was presented at town meeting. So I'm very happy to be here and say we're on target, exactly where we said we were going to be. I just want to come back to this 333. That number is higher than we had originally forecast, not higher than what we went to town meeting for, but it's higher, and it was because, if you remember, enrollment shifting between Northborough and Southborough at the high school. So we have an increasingly larger portion of the high school assessment. Our assessment's going up. So the high school budget is up 3.5% in fiscal 19. The general government budget is up 3.5%, and the K-8 school budget is up 3.5%. That's the budget. However, we have more kids going to the high school, and Southborough has less kids going to the high school. So our assessment actually went up over 9%. So that's what drove this number higher than what we would have normally anticipated, which is about a $248 increase. But it is what it is, and luckily for us, since we don't tax to the limits of 2.5, we've been disciplined, we had the ability to manage that shift in our assessment and go to town meeting with something that everybody could support. So bottom line here is the average single-family home is looking at a tax impact that is basically right in line with what we presented at town meeting. Again, I always look at things in terms of trends and seeing where we've been and where it looks like we're going. So this chart shows the increase in the average single-family home tax bill. So over 10 years, it's been about $190. But see this in here? These first 5 data points here. This is during the peak of the recession and the single home family values going down. Now, the thing that we had in our favor that many communities did is, as most were experiencing those declining home values, we also saw that $90 million, that single largest economic development. And so oftentimes people will say, hey, we just built this mall. Well, where are all those tax dollars? All those tax dollars kept taxes down through that recessionary period because we didn't just raise to the maximum of Prop 2.5. We had those tax revenues coming in, and it was a conscious decision by the Board of Selectmen as a policy choice to keep the tax impact as low as we could. Now you're back to these data points here. This is more of a typical increase. In these 2 years, fiscal 16 and 17, or 15 and 16, this is the Lincoln Street School. So $14 million debt excluded project. That hit the taxes. It was less than about $200 overall on the average single family home, but that's getting absorbed here. Then you're back to 248, 242, and then the 331 we just talked about was the high school assessment that drove it up. So, but as you look, this, again, this average not really going to represent what we're looking at. This is the trend that we're looking at. We also have significant building projects we know are coming. The fire station is in feasibility study right now, so we know that will be coming forward at the next couple of town meetings with some authorizations. And we have a few other things in our 6-year capital plan that are coming forward. One thing I want to point out as you look at this information, taxes go up. They tend to go up. Why? Because prices in general and inflation tends to go up. What I look at and what you should look at and put a heavy weight on is, what are we doing relative to our neighbors? You know, are we doing anything different? Are our taxes or our tax impact going up different, at a different rate than our neighbors? And the answer is no. The state ranks all the tax bills every year. We don't have the ranking for this year, but we know the ranking for last year because everybody's setting their tax rates right now. Years ago, the town of Northborough used to be number 53, the 53rd highest tax bill. Well, as we went through this period here and planning a little bit better, we saw our ranking drop consistently to where we are now, I believe we're 63rd. And relative to our other communities, their taxes have gone up more because we've dropped in that ranking, and we've sort of hit stabilization. This is where we are. So if we were doing something radically different, if taxes in Northborough were going up radically faster, you'd see us relative to our neighbors ticking up that list. I know it harkens back a little bit, but the Boston Globe did an article in March of 2014 where they looked at all the Metro West communities, I believe 56 Metro West communities, to look at how much taxes has gone up for the last 10 years at that point. And on that list, Northborough was not near the bottom. We were the lowest tax increase out of 56 Metro West communities for 10 years. Now, that's not something that you can sustain. As I said, it's good planning. You know, we were able to do this because we had great economic development, and you're using those revenues and you're giving the taxpayers a fair shake. And what you do when that happens is you're not taxing at the limits of Prop 2.5. There are a number of communities, when they start their budget process, they go, all right, this is our tax levy. We're gonna take everything we can under Prop 2.5. We don't do that. We haven't been at the hard limits of 2.5 for a number of years through good planning. If we were, we would have been in trouble when this happened with the high school. So good planning, our back is not against the wall, but again, you know, we want to be cognizant of, you know, this is what it takes to sustain the current level of services that people enjoy in the town of Northborough. So I talked a lot about economic development and what that means for us. This is one of my favorite charts. This is the top 15 taxpayers in the town of Northborough. Now, most towns produce a top 10. We used to do a top 10, and then people started getting nervous because every time we showed this chart, businesses were missing from it. And people were concerned that those businesses left Northborough. And we had to assure them, no, they didn't leave Northborough. They just dropped off the top 10 because we had newer, bigger, and better economic development. So as you look at this list of our top 15 taxpayers, roughly half of them have either come to Northborough in the last 10 years or have expanded their operations in Northborough in the last 10 years. So this is great economic growth. Even you look at Massachusetts Electric, they expanded and consolidate their whole regional call center in Northborough. Walmart expanded to a super Walmart. Genzyme came to Northborough. St. Gobain has expanded and continues to build labs in their main campus up off Goddard Road. A. Dewey Pyle is probably the last one that we added in here, number 15. Now, I mentioned earlier, we've seen development of the Gutierrez property out on Bartlett Street. When those developments come in and they come online, what you're going to see is some of these bottom top 15 are going to fall off, and those are going to take over up top. Again, this is positive for the town of Northborough because it means our tax base is strong, it's healthy, it's growing, and the most important thing I want you to take away from this slide is that it's diversified. We don't have one major taxpayer that's overly weighted or we're overly reliant on them. If you look, the top, Northborough Crossing is a top taxpayer, right? But even within the mall, there's diversity. You have the grocery store, Wegmans up there. You've got retail. You've got restaurants. So the entire mall isn't going to disappear overnight. And we've seen stores come and go out of there. We saw the golf store leave, and we have HomeSense that's come in. You know, so EMS left. We have Old Navy coming in. So it continues to be economically viable and vibrant. But as you look through here, we have R&D, we have commercial, we have manufacturing. We have a nice mix in our tax base. And that is something, when we get rated by the bond rating agencies, that's one of the things that they like to focus on. What's your tax base, but also how susceptible are you to a downturn in the economy? So a downturn in the economy might affect all of these industries and might affect some stronger than others. But with the diversification that we have, we're in relatively good shape. So this slide kind of brings everything that I talked about together in one place. You can see the individual valuations for residential, commercial, industrial, personal property going back from fiscal 15 to fiscal 19. It shows you what the tax rate looked like, the average single-family home. So this is what we're talking about. The average single-family home in fiscal 18 was a little over $422,000. and now it's $447. So it's about a $25,000 increase, or 6%. So that is, again, positive. Your assets are appreciating. Northborough continues to be a desirable place to buy a home. And then the average single-family tax bill, right here, that's the $331 increase that we talked about. So this chart, I like this chart because it shows everything in one place, including the $2.9 billion overall valuation of the town. So before I hand it over to Dan Broggie, just a couple of key points to summarize. One is the town's valuation is up, just shy of under $150 million. That is a positive trend for us and what we want to see. Our new growth continues to be positive, albeit at a new level, but I think it's fine as long as there's an understanding of what's behind the number and an understanding of what the expectations moving forward will be. And last but not least, we're delivering a tax impact exactly what was unanimously approved by every member of every financial board and committee and almost unanimously approved at town meeting. So there's no surprises here. We're right on target, another year of good planning, and puts us in a good place. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning that I want to say now is that overall, this is a key moment in our cycle in terms of our planning, because this is when the fiscal 19 budget is actually set. And we use fiscal 19 as the data point upon which to forecast for fiscal 20. So we've begun planning for fiscal 20, but now that 19 is a data point that's set, then we'll do our projections forward. We use that data point as we do our trend analysis back 10 years. So we look back 10 years, we look forward 5, and in December, on December 13th, all the financial boards and committees, as well as the K-8 school department committee, will get together and we will present the findings from the financial trend monitoring report as we do every year, and we set the table for this is the context within which we're going to plan the upcoming fiscal year. It's been very helpful because it gets everybody on the same page. Everybody agrees on the information, so we're not fighting over revenue projections, available resources, what's new growth going to look like. So tonight's actions are very important, and they're really the data point upon which we are going to move forward with our planning for fiscal. So with that, I do just want to acknowledge, before I hand it over, June Hubbard-Ward, our finance director, is here, Jason Little, the town accountant, of course, Kim Foster, the assistant town administrator in the back there. This is our financial team. These are all the people that do all the analysis and put this stuff together for your viewing pleasure. And last but not least, as I hand the mic over, Dan Broggie, he's our principal assessor. He's going to run you through the meat of what you have to do here, which are the actual classification discussion and ultimately your vote. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
Okay, so as John mentioned earlier, none of the decisions, the 3 items you're going to be voting on tonight, regardless of what you decide, no additional monies are going to be raised. It's just a matter of shifting the burden between one group of taxpayers to another. So just keep that in mind. The first thing we'll talk about is classification itself, or splitting of the tax rate. And for illustration purposes, you can see here what happens if you take a single tax rate. You see up at the top part of the chart. Gives you the average single-family home value, condos, commercial, industrial, average values. In a proposed tax rate under a single rate scenario, and it gives you in the right-hand column, it gives you the tax bill for those various properties. With a small shift in the rate, splitting between commercial industrial, the residential and the commercial industrial, you can see what it does. You can see that the residential rate actually drops to $16.87. And what that does is, again, gives those properties, that average bill goes down on a single-family home, $126. However, again, we're going to raise the same amount of money. So to make up for that, the commercial industrial rate goes up. And you're shifting the burden from the residential taxpayer to the commercial industrial taxpayer. So to give that single-family home a little bit of a break, you're putting that on the commercial industrial taxpayer. You can see down below the roughly $1,500 on the average bill for a commercial property and about $2,300 on the average industrial property. So again, same amount of money being raised, but again, it's just who's paying, you know, and again, the message you want to send. So again, the board, as John said earlier, the town has never split the rate, and certainly the Board of Assessors is going to recommend to continue that. So the next item, residential exemption. Now, there are only 13 or 14 communities in the state that have adopted this. Generally, it's for communities that have a very low percentage of owner-occupied homes. So you'll get places like Boston or Cambridge or Somerville where you have a lot of apartments, you know, non-owner-occupied properties, or out on the Cape, Nantucket or Barnstable, I think Provincetown maybe. They have, again, a lot of summer homes. So again, those people wouldn't qualify because they're not primary residences. So they can, if they adopt this, essentially they're getting, you know, more out of those properties. So what happens on the residential exemption, again, what it does, this has no bearing on the commercial industrial taxpayer at all. This is just shifting within the residential class. So what it does is you're giving an exemption. In this case, in this scenario, we adopt a 10% exemption. That's on the average residential value, not the average single-family value. And what it does is it essentially, to make up for the loss in taxable value or assessed value, it raises the tax rate to make up for the loss in value. So thereby, so again, you can read across, if you look to the left, you take the average single-family home, $447,000, multiply that by the tax rate, and you get and then you get the average single-family tax bill. If you adopt an exemption, the net taxable value of that average home goes down. However, how are we going to make up for that? Well, we're going to raise the rate. So again, so to do that, what happens is you raise the rate, and the bill, you can see, is very close. And you can see it in different scenarios. The lower price house obviously saves the most. The person at the higher end, say $600,000, which isn't really that high anymore around here, pays essentially a surcharge. It's almost like the person with the house, $600,000 house, is writing a check to the person with the $300,000 house. So again, it's shifting the burden. It's only within the residential class, no bearing on commercial industrial taxpayer. And down below, just for so you can see, the break even is this year is about $463,000. If your house is assessed a little less, is less than that, you save a little bit. If you're higher than that, it's actually going to cost you more with the exemption. So again, it's just a matter of who you want to pay. So and then finally, again, I think now there are only the small commercial exemption. This is for properties valued at less than $1 million, not more than 10 employees. And the issue here, too, is you don't necessarily give the business a break. You might be giving the building owner a break, depending on the way their leases are written up, if it's commercial property. So what you've got to decide is if you want to, if you adopt this, you know, if you're willing to essentially charge your larger businesses, your anchor tenants in town, if you will, a surcharge. They're going to, again, you're going to give the small businesses or small property owners a break, and that's going to be borne by the larger taxpayers. So all three of these items, again, no change in the amount of money that's being raised. It only shifts the burden from one group of taxpayers to another, and it again, it's just a matter of the message I think you want to send every year to your commercial taxpayers, this and also the classification itself. So with that, the board does recommend that we maintain a single tax rate as we have in the past, not adopt the residential exemption, and not adopt a small commercial exemption. Again, we never have, and we're recommending that going forward. The communities around us that we deem ourselves to be comparable to, they also have single rates and do not have the residential exemption or small commercial exemption. Again, very few towns adopt really any of these. So With that, are there any questions I can answer? Anybody?
From the board. Comments before I open it up to the public? Leslie?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation,
Sure.
Dan and John, and thank you to the financial team. It's a lot of work, I know, every year. And I know we hear this discussion, we have this presentation every year, but I still find it interesting, John.
I'm glad.
There's always some new piece of information I learn, but one thing I do like seeing every year, too, is a list of top taxpayers. And I am glad that we have such a diversified list, and it's not just one major, because if that one major organization or company left, that would be traumatic. And so I'm glad to see that there are this many large taxpayers, but as usual, I'm much in favor of the single tax rate. First of all, in terms of attracting business, it's a disincentive for businesses to want to come here. And I would worry that some businesses, if they get a lease somewhere else or there's an opening in another town, that they take off. So I just don't see any logic in adopting a split tax rate.
Sure.
The rest of the board? Julianne?
So back to one of the first slides, I think it was slide number 5. It said residential values are up 5.7%, commercial values up only 2.3%.
Right.
Is that like a steady state, or is that?
Oh, no, that could
unusual
change.
issue?
I mean, next year, well, I don't think it'll be next year, but a few years from now, you could have commercial values up to 3.3% and residential values down 5%. I hope that doesn't happen, but sure, if the market goes into decline, one has really nothing to do with the other, you know? So you could have residential or residential properties going up or down at the same time, commercial or industrial going the other way, you know? So you can't really, they're totally different. They're valued differently. The commercial properties are generally valued on income, what the income stream is. If rents aren't going up, it's kind of hard to raise their values, right? If you have retail or office space that's vacant, there's not much you can do. Where houses, say single-family homes or condominiums, if the market's strong, they could go up 10% a year and be right on, you know? Has really no bearing on a commercial property, so.
And I have one more question.
Sure.
So you provided us with comparable tax rates of other communities?
Yeah.
And notably, Shrewsbury is very low, $12.66 per
Right.
thousand.
Yep.
How do they do that?
Oh, can I answer that one,
yeah, go ahead.
please?
Sorry?
Please, can I answer that one through the chair?
Yes.
All right. So, first of all, taking nothing away from Shrewsbury, they're a well-managed town, just like Northborough is. But Shrewsbury gets 20% of their budget in state aid. Northborough gets 9% of its budget in state aid. So to put that in real numbers, we get a little over $5 million in state aid. If we got the same percentage as Shrewsbury, we would have $10 million in state aid. And your tax impact would look completely different. The reason for that is when ed reform went into place, the Chapter 70 formula is a very, very complicated formula. We spent how many hours, Jason, with our friends over superintendent last week? 2 hours, 2.5 hours? Just this year alone, going through the Chapter 70 formula. But the bottom line is that there are aspects of that were frozen in time, going back to the early 90s, and as that process and that formula has changed, they've held people harmless, and they add another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer. And so what you have is Shrewsbury, which is a pretty comparable community to Northborough, yet they get 20% of their budget in state aid. When I worked in Chelmsford, we always used to look at the town of Franklin, the same thing, comparable communities, and they got twice the state aid that we got. And so it's a quirk of the formula that goes back, several decades ago, that sort of got frozen in time. But that's the big factor. If we got $5 million more in state aid, 20%, we'd be in great shape. And just for the record, if anybody's paying attention, back in 2003, state aid made up over 13% of our operating budget. Now come all the way forward to fiscal 19, it's about 9%. So who do you think's making that difference up? the taxpayers, everybody in this room, or most of the people in this room. But that's really the magic right there. Yeah, so give me another 5 million and I will reduce your taxes and reduce the tax rate very quickly.
Thank you.
Questions from the board? I'm going to open it up to the public because it is a public hearing. But first, I'd like to recognize Karen Chapman from the Chamber. And Karen, would you like to say a couple words? We do have a letter from the Chamber.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Just come up here. That way they can hear you.
That would work, right? Thank you. And to the Board of Selectmen, thank you for allowing me to speak. On behalf of the Chamber, which we represent over 500 member businesses in the towns of Northborough, Southborough, Shrewsbury, Grafton, and Northborough, if I didn't say that already. But it's very important to us and our business community that we continue to maintain a single tax classification. It is a #1 attractor for businesses in this community, for small business and corporate business, and we do work with businesses like Wegmans, who's definitely one of your best taxpayers in this community, and a good community supporter. Not only are they good tax revenue supporters, but they're also good supporters of a lot of other things that are happening in the community, whether it's your little leagues or a lot of community organizations. So we are truly in support of single tax classification and maintaining that like the rest of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Members of the public, would anyone like to comment? Questions from the board? I'm going to close the public hearing then. And do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
wrong slip. I move the board vote to close the public hearing with the Board of Assessors for the purpose of discussing the valuation of each class of property, the minimum residential factor, and the allocation of the tax burden among the 4 classes of real property: residential, open space, commercial, and industrial, and of personal property.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, do I hear? I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Do you have another motion?
I do.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to maintain a uniform tax rate for all classes of property at a factor of 1, to oppose the implementation of a residential exemption, and to oppose the implementation of a small commercial exemption.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the backtrack for the approval of the minutes of the November 5th, 2018 regular meeting.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of November 5th, 2018.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carries in the affirmative. Okay, it's past the hour, 7:30 PM. Sandra Coombs, presentation on 2018 Holiday Trolley event.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. I brought an esteemed trolley rider from the past few years with me for some support. So as you all know, this is the 13th year of the Northborough Holiday Trolley. And previously, the Northborough Holiday Trolley was run by Northborough Local First, but as of last year was taken over by some other members of Northborough because Northborough Local First no longer had the capacity to run it. So I've been the leader of the trolley for the past 2 years and had helped out previously, or previous to that. The Northborough Holiday Trolley, our main mission is to raise awareness and engagement in the town to support our local small businesses. The day of the trolley, there are 2 trolleys that start at the Lowe's Plaza at 243 West Main Street, and they go up and down Main Street to either side of the town. So there's an east trolley and a west trolley, and they stop at participating local businesses and let the riders off. The riders participate in different events and activities that are going on at those businesses. They get back on and they ride the trolley as much as they'd like all day in a hop-on, hop-off style. And the day culminates at the end, and you'll hear from Rebecca next with the Northborough town tree lighting. So it's just a really fun, festive way to get in the spirit of the holiday season and also to support our local businesses, which we believe are essential to making Northborough what it is. So we have a variety of sponsors that help us to support the trolley And we really enjoy the day, and we really think it's a special day, and it's a really special thing that Northborough offers the town. So I just wanted to see if she's awake now, if you wanted to say something about your favorite part of the trolley.
My favorite part about the trolley is going to all the stores and doing the arts and crafts.
Yeah. Do you like the singing, too? Questions from the board? It's a great event. I've taken part in it many times, and it's always fun, especially the kids singing and playing their little instruments. So, lovely.
How has it worked out for your group to have taken over the running of this?
Sure. So last year we had a very successful year in maintaining the engagement of the town and community. Really had similar successes to what we had seen in the past. This year we've seen a decline in sponsorship somewhat. I'm not sure what the main reasonings are. We'll be sending out a survey at the end of our time to kind of get a feel for what those reasons are. One of the reasons that I can, just surmise is the fact that we no longer have the, it's no longer supported by Northborough Local First primarily, and that was a group that really, got together all of the local small businesses. They all worked together with that group, and so there was an easy way for them to all communicate, to really understand what the trolley was about, and to want to participate in it because, it was really benefiting Northborough Local First as a whole. As it stands right now, it's, just members of the community looking to keep the tradition alive and the support of the small businesses alive. So, I feel like we don't have as much outreach with that maybe, but we're still able to, stay in the black as far as our finances are concerned. So we hope to see additional improvements in our outreach and, understanding of the market for next year. But that's where we stand for this
You're
year.
doing a great job organizing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to authorize the operation of the Holiday Trolley on Saturday, December 1st, 2018, from 11:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and to authorize the proposed trolley stop locations.
Second?
Motion's made, seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Good luck.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Enjoy the arts and crafts.
That's right. Okay, it's past the hour of 7:35. Rebecca Milhopoulos, Community Affairs Committee, presentation on the 2018 tree lighting event and request to close Lake Street. And I'm sure I murdered the last name, so how do you say it?
My name is Rebecca Foley Mahopoulos, so, yes, it's a mouthful. And I'm a member of the Northborough Community Affairs Committee. And I'm here this evening to tell you about this year's holiday tree lighting and also request the closure of Blake Street for this event, which will take place on Saturday, December 1st at 5 p.m., which will immediately follow the Holiday Trolley event. The annual tree lighting began in 1968 in honor of Army Private First Class Neil Ellsworth, a former resident who was killed in the Vietnam War. So each year we hold this holiday tree lighting, and at the tree lighting, cookies and hot chocolate and pizza are given out while supplies last. Get there early. Holiday carols will be sung by children. Bells will be given out to everyone to jingle along the way, and finally the event will conclude with the Holiday Trolley raffle drawing, which Sandy mentioned. Pizza is donated by longtime supporters, Northborough House of Pizza, and also this year, Mama's Pizzeria as well. We are asking for monetary donations for pizza, which will go directly to the Northborough Food Pantry. The event wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. This year's sponsors include Anthony Joseph Real Estate, Avidia Bank, Jacob Stein Dentistry, and Wegmans. So, yeah, thank you. We hope to see you all there. It's a great event, very fun. Children love it. It is a packed event, but everyone seems to really enjoy it and look forward to it every year.
Thank you. And it is a great event. I think we all enjoy it. Will the children be singing again this year?
They will be singing again this year from Z School, yes.
From Z School.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? Leslie?
Not a question, just a comment. It's always a great event, a lot of fun. Everybody has fun, even if it's cold. Yes. And I think it's great, too, that there's more lighting during the past few years. I think that's very important. Sometimes there are older people there, and there was a fall, I think it was Ellsworth, actually, relative that had fallen off
Okay.
a curb. And
Okay, yes.
so I think that the lighting there is very important, and it still is a wonderful, you get a nice ambiance anyway with that, so it's very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to close Blake Street on Saturday, December 1st, 2018, from 4:30 PM to 6:30 PM for the tree lighting ceremony.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Good luck.
All
And
right.
enjoy it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Thanks, good night.
Okay, it's past the hour of 7:40 PM. Applefest follow-up discussion to discuss the event schedule expectations for future planning of the annual Applefest celebration. I know we have a lot of people here from Applefest, so I'm a little confused because I thought that having received a correspondence from the Applefest committee, I'm not sure what individual sent it, but that we were going to continue this to the next meeting. So I actually, John sent out this correspondence to everybody, and Diane called the Doyles from the Rotary, so they're not here tonight, because we told them this wasn't gonna happen. But since you're all here, if you want to present, but I think we have to wait until the next meeting before we would take any steps, because it's only fair to let the Doyles be here and hear from them too. So, unless the board has any other way to handle this. Michelle,
We'd like to table it to the next meeting.
would you?
Yes,
Okay, that's agreeable to all of you?
yes.
Okay.
It would have been helpful if somebody maybe sent a note to us.
I did.
When it was sent to the Doyles, that we could have been aware, because this was a surprise this afternoon.
Well, like I said, I responded saying that we would continue it to the next meeting.
I definitely did not see that. And that
You didn't.
email goes to the full committee.
I did send it. Actually, we have a copy of it.
Copy of it here, if you'd like to see it.
So-
But nothing went to the Doyles until after I received this from the chairman that you'd requested it be continued. Then we contact them. That's the communication with them based on this, but, so.
I think basically, since the agenda had already been published, I think the fact that it had been published, we felt like we needed to come just to ask in person for a continuance for next month.
Okay. The agenda is always posted on a Thursday
No,
afternoon
and-
before the town hall closes.
Right, we
And once
understand
it's
that.
posted that way, we can't change it, but we can continue it until the next meeting. If that's agreeable to
I think it
everybody.
was just a little miscommunication. We understand that you're required to post it, and I think the fact that we asked for it after the fact, we felt we needed to come in person and ask in person to continue it till next month.
No, okay. As long as everybody's okay with that? The board's fine? So-
Yeah, I would prefer to have one discussion with all the parties in the room, actually. That would be my
You
preference.
don't want this to go on forever?
All right, thank you, and I'm sorry you had to sit through that whole presentation, but now you know more
It
about the
was
tax rate than you ever
riveting.
wanted.
It was riveting.
It's very good. Michelle, I'm sure it was very helpful for you.
It was good. It was very good.
You're apologizing for my presentation.
No,
Just because you've heard it 20 times.
it's always stimulating. All right, thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Leslie?
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel bad. I do wish we were discussing this and resolving it so that all the parties can, move on and do what they need to do. So it's too bad that we can't have this discussion and kind of just take care of this, but, okay.
Is it just by agreement, or do we need a motion to
I think we can just agree.
disagree? Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry. Reports. Julianne?
So I just have two things today. Last Tuesday, I attended the informational meeting about the town green. It was very well attended, lots of good suggestions. I think it's an indication that everyone is excited about it and it will be well used. And I just always want to say thanks to that group, to the town green committee that got the project going. And secondly, this is a bit of a statement, a bit of a question. A few weeks ago, I attended a meeting of the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association. And one of the topics that was addressed was the use of social media in towns. And after the meeting, I started looking at other towns' websites and how they look and how they portray their information. And so there's two things here. One was on our website, we agreed that our email contacts would be listed with our names. And I understand that we are now hyperlinked to an email, but I wonder if that's really clear enough. Whether there should be some statement, click on to email your selectmen. And the other question I have is, what is the current status of redesigning our website, and how do we all feel about how user-friendly it actually is?
John?
The redesign of the website is one of the projects that is on our list of things to do. I think one of the issues that we're facing right now is we have a rather extraordinary workload, frankly. And I'm actually will be sitting down with the board members in the next week or so to go over that. But redesign of the website is one of the things that we're looking at. As you know, we were able to secure a $40,000 grant from the state to do a holistic assessment of our MIS department. And there are components of that are security, but also the website and how to make things more easily accessible. So that, again, that's one of the projects that's coming up. Realistically, given other priorities that we have right at the moment, that's something we're probably going to be working on more come springtime.
And the email?
I'm not sure what your concern is on the email. If you click on Board of Selectmen, it has everybody's name right there with, and you just click on the name and you can email. That's how it is through the entire.
I've had a couple of people look at it, and it's just not inherently obvious that you can do that.
Okay.
I wonder if it would be better to at least have the direction to contact your selectmen, click on their name or something. Is that easy to do, or?
No one's having a problem finding me.
Sure, I guess.
Would it be possible to add a link that sends an email to the entire board? Something like that also?
Yeah, that's what we originally had.
That's what we had.
And then people wanted individual.
Yes, I understand. I'm just thinking if somebody wants to contact an individual, they can click on their name. If they want to contact all members of the board, they can.
Sure, we
just
can add
do the thing just as a
to
separate-
email the entire board.
Yeah, yeah.
Click here? Yeah, that's no
I
problem.
think that would
That'd be
satisfy
great.
it.
Yeah, that wouldn't be much at all.
And to conclude, I just want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Tim?
I attended a Parks and Recreation Commission meeting last week. They have a lot of exciting stuff going on over there, lights at the middle school, some grading of fields. I just wanted to compliment everybody that works on that commission. They all work extremely hard. It's the first meeting I've been to, and was just blown away by the amount of time and effort that all those people put into making sure that the kids in town have a great experience when they're participating in youth sports around town. So, and Scott and Robo at the DPW, they contribute. They all do a wonderful job. I just wanted to publicly say thank you to all of them for the work that they do. I attended a board meeting last week. I think the big thing on the agenda for the board meeting was the proposed construction at 222 West Main. Just so everybody's aware, that's gotten moved to the next planning board meeting. So if anybody's interested in attending that, that will happen at the next meeting. I wanted to thank Scott Charpentier for helping me out with the issue at Indian Meadow with some road safety concerns. Got in touch with Scott, and he responded real quick and took care of that. So thank you for taking care of that. The residents were very thankful. And lastly, December 11th at 5 p.m., the Senior Center is holding their annual holiday party. Tickets are $12. That includes dinner and a dance performance. So that is it. That is my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie?
Are we ready to do the interviewing motions? Okay, I'll just go ahead. I think I can do it by memory. Okay. Dawn and I are both on the interview committee, and we interviewed 2 individuals this evening. I'd like to make a first motion. That would be for a position on the Youth Commission, and that we appoint James Harrington.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
The second is for a position on the Library Board of Trustees, and we interviewed Hamilton Soriano, and I make a motion that we approve him for that position as well.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Okay. I'd like to, again, thank the police department for the extra coverage at the polls on November 6th. I know that was appreciated by a lot of parents and myself, and just knowing that there was extra coverage there, so that as people come in the front doors, they cannot go down a hallway and so forth. So there's one stationed at the machine that takes the ballots, and then there was another strategically placed, so that I think people felt comfortable and kids couldn't wander in and out and see random individuals wandering down the hallway. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that very, very much. Chief Parenti, thank you very much for posting information on Facebook, certain statistics and information. I think people like to see that, and I think that's all part of wanting to be transparent in everything that we all do. And I think the more that residents can see, the better. And it's a better understanding for what your department does too, and the work that goes on behind the scenes there. Also attended the Town Common Input Meeting, really interesting, and I think it's a great design. I can see that there were 2 designs initially. One was a little bit more rectangular looking. This is a very kind of a prettier design, rounded edges, and the way they looked at the memorials and how those would be set up, speaking about materials that would be used, an entryway, fencing, all that kind of thing. Very, very informative meeting with a lot of input from residents who were there, and I think it's great that residents showed up for that. I attended the Gale Library Open House on November 7th, and I wanted to thank Library Director Chris Lindquist for his work. He worked with the Historical Society to bring in a lot of documents, old photos, paintings. It's really very interesting to walk around in there and look at some of these things that are set up in the large conference room as you come in the library to the right. And Chris said that those things will be set up through the end of December if you just want to wander in and take a look. And I understand there's some display cases there now that house some of the documents that really should be in display cases, I think, too, because some of these things are old. So that very, very nicely done. And just one last thing about crosswalks, kind of my usual thing. Now that we have kind of bad weather coming and maybe the crosswalks aren't as visible, I ask that people pay extra attention to those crosswalks because people still are out running and walking their dogs and pushing strollers. So I just wanted to remind residents of that. So that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, just a couple of items. One, I also attended the meeting last week for the Town Common Design presentation, which was very well received by everyone in the room, and I think addresses every aspect that we would be concerned about, from the aesthetic aspect, the functional aspect, and certainly the maintenance and public safety aspect. I think everyone's pretty pleased with the outcome and the ability not only to put it in place, but to maintain it and enjoy it for a period of time. So we look forward to seeing more details about the specific design, materials, and everything. And I think it will shape up to be a very excellent project with everyone's involvement. Finally, just have a safe Thanksgiving. Always a busy travel time, and just use a little more care and caution if you're out on the roads. Hope everyone has a very enjoyable holiday. So that concludes my report.
Leslie, backtracking?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I forgot 2 things that are actually fairly major. I attended Mo's opening, and it was wonderful. Tim was there as well. And, you know, it was fascinating. I know they put a lot of time and effort into this. Laura Zeiton was involved with this. And it was a fantastic day for all. Really, it was more like a party. A lot of residents showed up. He put a lot of time and effort into the food and he had a spinning wheel to determine if you want a pie or you want different things. And the logo that was designed is wonderful. It's the one that you see on the sign out in front of the building. Sweatshirts had that same logo on it, calendar, pens, all these kind of things. But a lot of his family was there. friends, and it really is a testament to the kind of person that he is and the kind of integrity with that particular business. Really nicely done, and I want to congratulate them on that. It was a nice day. And also, I attended the Senior Center Country Store Fair, which was actually before that. And that was also very nicely done. There were a lot of things in the lobby area, and I realized in looking over into the cafeteria area that the whole thing was full of tables with knit things. All these people had made all sorts of handmade items, and just very, very impressive. You could tell there's a lot of work that went into that. And I wish I could have stayed longer, but it was very, very nicely done as well. And I thank Kelly Burke for that. So thank you, Dawn, for letting me do that.
Thank you. Okay, just a reminder, November 29th, financial trend monitoring at the library, 7 PM.
The fire station presentation is November 29th.
Wrong one, fire station that
Okay.
night.
And December 13th, 7 PM in the library is the financial trend monitoring.
Sorry, chief.
I had to be there for both.
Okay. Okay, that concludes my report. John?
You just gave mine, so I'm good.
Okay. Public comments. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Maselli of 13 Maple Street, and as most of you know, my property was once part of the White Cliffs, along with an underground tunnel we shared. When the property got split up, they closed up my end of the tunnel, but I'm not here to complain about that. I'm just actually interested in what's going on with the White Cliffs because of my connection to that. I've attended several meetings, and at the October 2nd meeting was told that there was no provision for public comment there, which is why I'm here tonight. I'm concerned that the structure at 167 Main Street is deteriorating at a greater speed than it should be due to lack of an urgent need to get it fixed. The town voted on April 25th, 2016 to purchase and preserve the building with community preservation funds. The actual transaction took place on September 25th, 2017, almost a year and a half later. It's taken another year to choose an architect, and no meetings are planned as of this date for deadlines to make the building secure for the winter, 3 years after the town's directive, and with the snow that's already happening, and I think we're going to have a pretty bad winter. The directive at the town meeting was to make it historic preservation purposes and costs relating thereto, including property maintenance, protection, and insurance, professional service costs for environmental and site assessments to determine appropriate preservation measures. And at that meeting, there was a vote that 218 to 67 in favor of keeping the building as a historic building. So my questions are, one, where are we in the process of buttoning up the building? Has a consultant been contracted yet, and who is it? Has Tom Reardon done regular walkthroughs, as was stated on the minutes of the first meeting? And when was the last time one was done? What has been done to date to secure the building? I have heard at several meetings that the consultant was to assist in assessing the town's potential reuse scenarios, including various potential ownership structures. But the town did not make the charge to study viability to keep the structure or resell the property to make it a placeholder for a developer or to put multifamilies or anything else in its place. It was charged with the purchase and preservation of the iconic mansion property. So far, the gazebo has been removed along with several plantings, the sign and its plantings as well. The third-party tree company has removed limbs by electrical wires last month, and yet the building itself cannot be made winter-ready without contracting the architect, and I want to know why that is. Where are the minutes of the past meetings? And basically, where are we on this? We're coming into our third winter, and I'm concerned.
John, do you wish to comment?
Sure. Very briefly, the committee has the committee has issued as required under Chapter 7 of the state procurement laws, under designer selection, we have to go out for a request for proposal. So that's a whole process that we've completed. We've done interviews of architectural firms, and we have narrowed down, and the committee's made a selection. And as of right now, we're in contract negotiations with the architect to get them on board and to get them moving forward. So that's where we are. I do want to address there was a long delay between town meeting and us closing on the purchase and sale. The reason for that is under the purchase and sale, we have a due diligence 21E review, which the town conducted, and that's for hazardous materials. And when we did that, we found a underground storage tank. That underground storage tank was from the 1970s and had leaked a very significant amount of oil underneath that property. And it took the better part of a year for the owner to conduct the assessment, to work with DEP, and to do the remediation. I want to say something like 500,000 cubic yards of soil was removed. It was such a big hole that you could, behind White Cliffs, you could drop a split-level house into the hole and walk across the roof. That's how big this remediation project was. So that was the initial delay. As far as the trees being cut along the electrical lines, that's National Grid who does that, just like they do the tree trimming up and down any of our roads. So right now, we're in contract negotiations, and we're trying to wrap that up, and as soon as that is, we'll schedule a meeting of the committee. And as far as I know, should be close to being updated with our minutes. We might be off by one meeting, if that, but typically we review and approve the minutes just like this body does at their subsequent meeting, so.
But you haven't addressed what you're going to do to close up the building for the winter.
Right, well, that's part of what we're engaging the architect. The architect has a number of subs. That's one of the things that sort of complicates we're not just hiring an architect to do design work. It's the architect is hiring consultants to do structural evaluations, building envelope evaluations, and all those things. The majority of the work that's done in this first initial phase with the architect is their subs going out there and doing all of this work. And one of the things that we've had extensive conversations with them and with the committee is, as you can imagine, it's almost endless. So we need to really prioritize the limited amount of funds that we have at this point in time to get done the work that needs to get done in a priority order. So that's it.
So there's no time limit on it, though? There's no time set after we've now had a first snowstorm? You haven't got anybody up there that's checked it? Has Tom Reardon checked it to see where the building is?
Yeah,
As he was supposed
DPW staff goes up there on a regular basis, and Tom Reardon, who those of you who don't know, Tom's an architect. He's also a building inspector in another community, and he graciously agreed to go in and, on a regular basis, keep an eye on the structure for us.
So he's been looking at.
He has been. I'm not sure the last time he was in, though.
Thank you.
All right?
And you're sure that that it's fine, the building's not getting...
Oh, no, the
destroyed
building's
or
not
anything?
fine. It's, it's an old building with all sorts of issues, so I know there's plenty of stuff going on in that building. One of the reasons why we acquired it was to preserve it, but no, the building is old and needs a lot of work, and as I think we know that from the discussions at town meeting.
Well, the gazebo that was mentioned was unsafe.
The gazebo is not historic in nature. It's a fairly routine gazebo that you might buy at Home Depot and plunk up there, but it was structurally unsound. The things that have been removed, including limbs, were things that were immediate safety issues. That gazebo was going to fall down, which is why DPW went up there. They trimmed the bushes around it, and we're just basically doing landscaping, and it almost collapsed on them. So for safety reasons, we removed it. But we haven't touched anything relative to the historic building itself. Just some of the surrounding structures that, again, are of no historic consequence, but were unsafe. So,
Thanks.
all right.
Julianne?
So I guess this question might be for Scott. When you go in on your routine inspections, are you noticing that things are getting worse, or are they kind of just holding steady state?
The intent is to go into the building, make sure the windows are still secure, the doors are still secure, empty the buckets from the leaks, make sure there's been no evidence of anybody going in and then leaving. No, not that we're doing an intrusion inspection, but any evidence of people on the grounds.
But everything is kind of holding. Nothing is getting worse, or?
We don't know how deteriorating, how fast this building is deteriorating. That's not our intent of the visits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Set the meeting schedule for January through April 2019. John?
Yes. In your packet is a proposed meeting schedule. Unlike many other times in the year where we have conflicts with holidays or anything like that, we're looking at regularly scheduled meetings in January. So the second and fourth Mondays would be January 14th, January 28th, February 11th, February 25th, March 11th, March 25th, April 8th, and then on the 22nd, if you can believe it, is our annual town meeting. So that's the proposed schedule.
Okay. Everybody else set with those? All right, no
Sure.
problems, no conflicts? Okay. All right, any other, we need to set the meeting schedule.
Yes.
Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to set the meeting schedule as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation regarding Town versus Anzer and Town versus City of Marlborough, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding these matters in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation re Town versus Anza and Town versus City of Marlborough, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Julianne?
Aye.
Aye.
Leslie?
Aye.
Aye. So, and we will only come out of executive session to go into open meeting to adjourn.